Ciao a tutti. This is Prof Jo at Prof Jo Explains, and this is the recap from the trial day in the Paul Caneiro murder trial. And today, I guess my summary capsule description is timing is everything. We spent a great deal of time today trying to nail down how much time Paul Caneiro would have had to murder his family and set the house on fire, given a description of the car that law enforcement believes was his car going to the scene and the timing on it. So I will get to that. But we will start with a rundown of the witnesses. The first witness we heard from today was a next door neighbor, and his daughter played with Keith Caneiro's daughter, and he had been to the house many times, and he was on his way to a meeting in, I believe he said Trenton. There he is, plastic surgeon. And my view was clearly he's a plastic surgeon because he doesn't have a tie on. If he was a surgeon who did sort of cancer or orthopedic stuff or any of the other kind of surgeon, he'd have a tie on. But I think the plastic surgeons maintain a slightly more hip attitude. In any event, he was on his way to Trenton for a meeting, and he got a call from his landscaper. And that landscaper, it was a really good citizen, concerned citizen, or some people might say a sort of a nosy person, although in this case, everything he did was just great. But he had called, because remember, he called the neighbor across the street that we heard from last week, who had called Paul, called Jennifer, got worried, crossed the street, walked towards the house, and saw the fire. And I think she may have been one of the ones who called 911, but it was the landscaper that alerted her that there seemed to be something going on in the house. Well, he also called this plastic surgeon and said he thought that Keith Caneiro was burning leaves in the backyard, and he was concerned about it because it was not a day in which it was lawful to burn leaves, and he thought that Keith Caneiro would get a ticket or a citation. So his neighbor turned around, left from going to his meeting, and went back to the house. That's quite a neighbor, to see what was going on. He drove up. I think he might have parked out, didn't park in the driveway. He parked outside on the street, walked up the driveway. He went to the door on the front of the house that he expected to be open, because that's the door that when he would drop off his daughter was usually open. The front doors weren't. This was doors as if you looked at the house to the right. And then he went around the other side because he knew that Paul had burned leaves in the past, and he did them in apparently a big barrel, metal barrel in the back. So he went in the back and didn't see anything. But then he saw fire underneath the house. He started back down to make a phone call. He had getting in his car, which he called a truck, but it was a high vehicle. And when he got on I guess it would be the runner, to get into the truck, he saw a body. And he was already on the phone with 911 reporting the fire. He saw the body. He reported the body. 911 told him, and he had taken a look, and he was pretty sure he saw blood, and he was pretty sure it was a body, not a live person. The 911 a person told him to get away because the perpetrator might be still on the premises. So he then left, and you could hear the nerves in his voice, which you can imagine anybody would feel nervous about it. And he said on the stand that he wasn't sure it was Keith, but he was pretty sure it was Keith when he saw the body. So we started out with that witness. He was taken out of sequence. Excuse me. He was taken out of sequence remember we had left on Friday and Thursday, we were left with one of the police witnesses who was on the stand. And so we heard from this witness. And then the second witness was someone, and somewhere I've got all the names, but the trial ended late and I wanted to get on, so I'm not going to be able to give you names. But it was referred to as a very good friend of Paul's. And there she is from Colombia, did not speak English well. And so she had a team of interpreters, and they usually do that if they think it's going to be a session of any length, because the interpreters can get tired. So there's one, and you see the one who's standing interpreting, and then they switch, and the other one comes in to interpret, and she would sit down. So she was interpreting for the best friend, or the very good friend, who knew some English, because a couple of things the judge said to her, she was reacting before she got the translation, but her English was evidently not very good. And in fact, part of the testimony she gave was that Paul was helping her learn English. I'm assuming that Paul knows Spanish, because otherwise this relationship with her seems to me would be a little difficult. Since I think relationships include talking and interacting. But in any event, she testified that she and Paul had taken a couple of trips to Colombia together, which he paid for, that they had made trips to Las Vegas, to New York, to Boston, and I'm missing a place in the United States that they went. He paid for it. She said she paid for her own rent on her apartment, except for one time when she needed help, and then she paid him back. He also paid for applications for her when her daughter was applying for college. So he paid for, some things, and certainly and he paid the payments on her car. She'd gotten a new car, and he was making the payments on the car. So that was his very good friend. I frankly could not figure out why she was called at all. She did not seem to me to have any relevant information. She did say, I don't even think she did say that once Paul had asked if he could borrow her credit card. It was a Macy's card. He had made some purchases on the card. She could not remember what the purchases were or the amount of the costs, but she paid them, and she said, I don't remember whether he reimbursed her. I don't think he reimbursed her for those payments. So that the only thing that even looked like something that was relevant to this trial, to whether he committed 4 counts of murder and arson, would be one time when she paid a credit card bill for him, which might maybe a little suggest that he was in money trouble, but otherwise not, because she testified. She said she had never been in the physical company of Keith, but she had been present when Paul was on the phone with Keith, and their phone calls were always amicable. And she testified that Paul spoke highly of Keith. So as I say, I am perplexed as to how she helped the state's case. If anything, I thought she was more helpful to the defense, but maybe we'll find out as the trial goes on. Then we had another firefighter who testified, and we've got a picture of him. He had been a volunteer fireman in Colts Neck for, I think he said 18 or 19 years. And he had been the fire chief at the time of the fire of Keith's house in Colts Neck. And he had been one of the first fire people out there. He had gotten the call. He was at home. He went into the fire station and got gear and everything, and got a truck or whatever, the fire truck, to go out. And he went out to the scene with, I believe, 7 others, one of whom was driving the truck, and then maybe 7 together. One was driving the truck, and then it was he and the 5 others who went out to the scene. And they did the first preliminary check of Paul's premises, and no, Keith's premises, excuse me. And he testified that you could see the fire, that they went in, and he said the smoke was so heavy that you could not see anything, and that they did what he called left hand movement, uh, because they couldn't see anything. The left hand was against the wall, and then they would move forward, and they knew where they were because of the wall. And although he didn't say so, I believe that that's because with the heavy smoke, you could be disoriented immediately, not know where the door is to get out or anything else. So if you've got your hand on the wall, you can always reverse, put your right hand on the wall, and be able to find your way out of the fire. He said they started up the stairs from the front door, and I think they got to the landing between the first and second floor. There was one, I believe, firefighter behind him. The rest were in front of him, but he was feeling around and he felt a body. And the body was the 8-year-old. And he and the firefighter behind him carried her out and put her on the ground away from front of the garage. And you could tell his voice was very, he wasn't emotional, he didn't cry, but his voice was very strained as he told that story, as I imagine anyone, would feel finding a child. Firefighters, I'm sure that's the last thing that they want to see or find. So I thought, was a very effective witness. I mean, it wasn't a witness that went to whether Paul was guilty or not guilty, but he was a witness that described the horror of the fire, and he described the little girl finding her dead, which is the context clearly of the murder, and she's obviously one of the victims of the murder. So after him came the police officer who had been on the stand last Thursday, and he had been, there he is, the chief investigator for Colts Neck, and lead investigator for Colts Neck, and he and the lead investigator from the Monmouth County Prosecutor's Office handled the scene, made assignments as to who was going to do what, coordinated what law enforcement was going to do. And so he described that process of what they did and how they went about doing what they did. And he had been the officer last week who had found, who had been the officer who had been called out and discovered Keith's body. So he testified to the general arrangements. He testified that they had a meeting, I think it was the first or second night, with everybody involved to sort of coordinate who was going to do what, and to also share information, because there were all these units doing different things, and they wanted to be sure that everybody knew anything that any of them knew. And so again, his evidence didn't directly link to Paul in the sense of proving that Paul was the perpetrator, but again, his was evidence about the crime scene, the deaths, and some of what law enforcement was doing. So he also, the Colt Neck fire chief, whose picture we had up already, talked about finding the meter at Keith's house. And apparently they had done what they were going to have to do. He was the head of the unit that was going to secure the place, leave some firefighters there to be sure that the scene was left intact, because even though you think you've put out a fire, there might be a cinder, there might be something smoldering that could start the fire again. And so now you're looking at a picture of the meter, because what happened was he had assigned some of the firefighters to stay overnight, and then he made another perimeter check just to be sure everything was safe before he left the group of firefighters there. And when he got to the meters, he discovered that the the cover to the meter that you see was pulled off, and you can see it on the ground to the left. You see that sort of that gray big thing sitting there. That's the cover of the meter. Excuse me. And then he also found the meter itself on the ground, and that disabled the electricity from operating in the house. He also testified that although he testified with certainty that no one in his group had pulled the cover off the meter and pulled the meter out. That in his experience, no one else would have done that. He said in 19 years of going to multiple fires, he had never seen anybody do that. Of course, supporting the prosecutor's theory that Paul had gone to the house, pulled the meter out, which drew Keith out of the house, and that's when he could ambush him and shoot him to death, and then presumably then follow up, go into the house and kill the other three. So that his testimony did directly relate, not simply to the circumstances of the fire and the fact that there were deaths, but also directly related to the fact that that Paul was involved, according to the state's theory of the case. So he also said that they turned off the oh, now I'm not going to remember what it was, but they did a couple of other things to be sure that the fire wouldn't start again. But then we got into what I would say is what I would say was maybe the most interesting part of today, and that was it was the timing of when the 9/11 call was, and clearly the defense was moving to suggest that the timing meant that Paul could not have been the perpetrator. And we found out, we spent a lot of time following a car, which looked like a white Porsche, traveling from the road between Paul's house and Keith's house. And the witness on the stand, another police officer, testified that he had done that drive and it took 19 minutes. So you've got 19 minutes, that it would take Paul to get from Keith's house back to his house. But we watched this car, and since I am not visual, 2/3 of the time I couldn't see what we were supposed to see. I finally discovered that the court TV camera was not giving us the whole screen that you could see in the courtroom, because more than once the witness was drawing something on the photo that was being projected, and we couldn't see what was being drawn. And so at one point the court TV cameraman, I guess he raised the camera so we could see it, but he didn't do it all the time. And so we couldn't see where these little marks were being made, or at least I couldn't. At one point, they were showing us they were showing us the view from another house. And I thought I was looking at a wad of, what do I call a big wad of fur. And finally, somebody in the chat told me it was a bush or a shrub, and the camera from that house was behind it, so the bush was in the way. And I wanted to see that once more so I could maybe recognize a bush, because I swear to you, it looked like just a wad of white fur, which wasn't even very attractive there, but it was a bush that was in the way. They were able to get video, and that's one of the reasons why they were able to track the car, from two locations plus Keith's house on the road. So they had 3 cameras that could sort of track the car. And the defense went into, it's at this point they were doing a reasonable doubt defense. Well, why didn't you go get cameras, see if there were videos in other cameras. And you know that this road went to Paul's house, but you know that you could go this way and hit Route 34. So why didn't you go that way and get videos that way to see if maybe there was another car going that way that you could have tracked to Paul's house? So that's called a reasonable doubt defense. You say the police didn't do an adequate investigation. If they had done this, they might have found other evidence. So it's part of a reasonable doubt defense. And the defense lawyer spent, I would say, a fair amount of time suggesting that had happened, that there was, that there was the police investigation wasn't adequate. I do not think that made points with the jury. My guess is not, that the jury understands, as people in the chat were saying, that the police cannot, in an investigation, cannot do everything. They cannot follow every possible lead. At some point, they've got to make some reasonable judgments about what is likely or at least reasonably possible, because they don't have the time, the resources, the person power to follow every little track. And if they did, they wouldn't be able to do any other prosecutions. That would be the only one that you'd get done. So today we also heard from the other defense lawyer, who I thought did a really good job. He was very good laying foundation. He was very good when there was an objection that was sustained, being able to work back in and be able to ask a question that was a proper question. He really was very good at it. He was slow, very methodical, and also very slow. And I commented at one point that it was hard for me to believe that he lived in New Jersey, because New Jersey people aren't typically slow. It's much that the other defense lawyer, who can be annoying, is more the pace of there he is more the pace of, somebody from New Jersey, New York. So and he really was slow, but he was very, very respectful of the witnesses, and very thorough, and knew the points he wanted to make, and did a pretty good job of getting the points made. Actually, I'd say a very good job of getting the points made. And the one big issue that came up related to the time here, because what we learned was, although the neighbor next door, the plastic surgeon who came back when the landscaper called, and he had the house contiguous to Keith's, they shared a border, had heard no shots or anything unusual during the night. And remember, the neighbor across the street that we heard from last week also said she had heard nothing. The only reason why she crossed the street to see what was happening was because the landscaper called her also. She couldn't get either Keith or Jennifer on the phone. She thought that was unusual, so she went across the street and walked up the driveway to check. But she had heard nothing. But there was a call made, a 911 call made that night by someone, and I wrote his name down, and now I'm not going to be able to follow it. It was Dennis Codifer. Dennis, first name I know was Dennis. He had made a 911 call and said that he had heard shots. And we got into an issue of that 911 call. Remember, one of the law enforcement people had done the drive between Keith's house and Paul's house and said 19 minutes. And the call from that went into the CAD system, that is the system when you call 911, there's an automatic recording of the call, and of course it indicates, it shows when the call was made. And the call came in, according to the CAD system, at 3:33, I believe. It was either 3:33 or 3:38. Excuse me. There were so many time numbers thrown around during this that I lost track of what the time was, and I apologize for that. But I was trying hard, but excuse me. All of a sudden, I've urges to sneeze that just came upon me, and I don't know why. But I thought it was 3:40, 3:38, and then at the end, they said it was 3:33 when the call was made. And what we knew from the car that we've been following the whole time, was that the car did not go into Keith's driveway. It went past the driveway. The officer was very clear about that. And that it was 3:48 when the car left the area. I think that's right. So if the call was made at 3:33 and the car was out of the area at 3:48, then you have, 15 minutes in which Paul would have had to go into the house, onto the premises, pull disable the meter, wait until Keith came out, which wouldn't have been immediate. It would, got to count for a couple of minutes in there. Shot and killed Keith, went into the house, and then killed Jennifer, and then knifed the two children to almost death. They actually had smoke inhalation. And so there was quite a to-do about that. And I actually thought the defense lawyer made a really strong point here. One of the people in the chat, I think it was Kristen, said that, you can do all that in 15 minutes. And I opined, or I said that I had never tried to murder 4 people, shooting one, shooting and knifing one, and then knifing the other 2, and then pulling a meter out and trying to set a house on fire, and then getting back to my house. I've never tried it, and I assume nor had she, but I'm willing to believe she's correct. You can do all that in the house in 15 minutes, but nonetheless, it's a pretty tight time frame, and it might trouble one or more of the jurors, depending on the other evidence. The prosecutor then asked on redirect, asked the officer whether, or with the firefighter who had made I guess it was the officer. I'm trying to remember who that last witness was. Sorry, I came on too fast. I didn't really have a time, as I said, to really organize. But asked whether the Dennis Kapora, whether Dennis had said he waited a while after he heard the shots before phoning 911, and the officer said yes, he did. He said that. And the defense lawyer on recross had the officer's written report, which said that Dennis Kapora had said he waited a minute and then called. And he said that he heard the shots at 3:26 and phoned at 3:27. The CAD system said 3:33. So the times are off some. I do believe that the defense will attempt to focus at least a good part of the defense on the timing and the claim that there was not sufficient time for this murder to have taken place, and particularly if it was a premeditated murder where Paul had to think about how he was going to do it. He had to bring a gun with him there. So it wasn't something that, he got there and got into an argument and then killed his brother and then decided, well, I might as well kill everybody else. So he had to have planned to do it. And the state's theory is it's because he got caught out on all the financial finagling, and therefore it was planned, it was premeditated. But if that's the case, then, I think what the defense will claim is that he would have done it and given himself more time. Now, the prosecutor can say that Paul didn't expect that anybody was going to hear the shots. Those houses are so far apart. And the officer on the stand suggested that maybe the witness, Dennis Kapora, didn't hear shots. Maybe he didn't say it quite this way, but maybe it was serendipitous and had nothing to do with this. But what I suspect is going to happen is that Dennis Kapora will be called as a witness for the state. If it turns out that the defense is really going to focus on this, and my guess is the defense will, I'm guessing that Dennis Kapora will testify. And he's either on the witness list already and the state always planned to call him, or he would be a rebuttal witness now that this issue has come up so clearly. And he will testify that he waited a few minutes, if that's true, before he made the 911 call. Now, if that happens, and I was talking about this at the end of the day today, watching the trial, what the defense undoubtedly will do is to confront him with the statement, the summary done by the police officer who interviewed him. And the defense will say, well, the report says that you said it was this time. And they're going to go back and forth on it a little. And because I've seen this happen before. And Dennis Kapora is going to have to stand his ground about he knows what he said, or the police officer just wrote it incorrectly. But I've seen this happen before. So that's really what happened today. The big thing, as I say, was the timing at Keith's house and whether Paul would have had time to, if it was he, would have had time to commit the murders and get back to his home. Remember, at his house, the fire was discovered around 4:30, that the neighbor next door who woke up and heard the what she thought were people maybe arguing and looked out the window and saw two men, one going to the side of the house, one going to the front door. And then I'm not sure she said she saw smoke, but the other neighbor who was also awakened did see smoke, and this is about 4:30. So the timing at Keith's house, the officer said 3:48 is a hard time, that if the car that they tracked was Paul's car, then that car left Keith's at 3:48. So he would have gotten back to his house, Paul now. You give 20 minutes, it would have been 4:08. And the fire there is first seen at 4:30. So those times are tight too. But remember, he didn't really set big fires there. He put some, apparently lit the side of the garage, but that was just a small fire. And then he did the other side of the house. It looked like it was in the basement where that fire was. But those timing, that side of it is also tight, but doable. And depending on what the jury will hear from Dennis Kapora, who I really think is going to testify as to when he heard the shots, you get the range. And so we'll see what happens tomorrow with regard to that. So that's really my summary. I did it really quickly. And I wish I had been more organized. I apologize, but today just happened really quickly for me. And I didn't have a chance to sort of sit down with all the witness statements and match it up and do it in a really systematic, fashion for you. But I think you got the gist of it as to what happened today. And if you've got any questions, let me know what they are, and I'll try to handle them for you now, or if you have any comments about this, because otherwise, that's it for me. Okay, I see a couple. Here's one. This is from J.M. Dickerson. I keep thinking that we will hear any day now. This has nothing to do with this trial. keep thinking that any day now we're going to hear that Wendy Adelson has been arrested. What do you think? I have said before that I think there's enough evidence to go forward and prosecute her, at least for conspiracy to commit murder, which I believe in Florida is 30 years to life, and for the solicitation. And I think there's enough actually to prosecute her for murder one. But I have also said that in order for a jury to convict, the evidence there, which is less than the evidence against Charlie and less than the evidence against Donna, unless there's evidence they have that we haven't heard or don't know about, that the jury would have to take all the little nuggets of evidence and run the inferences toward guilt. Have to do it that way. And the best shot at convicting her would be if she got on the stand and testified, because every juror who's been interviewed from the first trial to Donna's trial has said that they thought she was lying on the stand and they thought she was involved. So she would be a great witness for the state, but I don't think she'll testify. So it's not an easy prosecution. I still think that the state of Florida that Tallahassee will prosecute her. I hope that they are not waiting for Charlie's appeals to be over in the hope or expectation that he might then turn on her, because Charlie's appeal is on February 3rd. And I don't think there's anything in his appeal that will result in a reversal. And I did a video on this about the issues in Charlie's appeal that you can, if you want to catch up on it before the hearing on February 3rd, just go into my playlist and find that video. I do not think there's anything in the appeal that will result in a reversal of his conviction. But once he, as I think will happen, he loses at the appellate level in Florida, he may petition the Florida Supreme Court to look at it. That will take another chunk of time. I don't think the Florida Supreme Court would be likely to take the case, but if it did, you even have a longer chunk of time. But when that's all over, Charlie still has the claim that Daniel Roshbaum had a conflict of interest, and that meant that Charlie was not provided the representation under the Sixth Amendment that he was entitled to receive from his lawyer. That was not an issue that could be heard on this appeal because it isn't within the four corners of the record. What goes up on appeal is what actually happened at the trial or pre-trial with regard to the evidence and the issues at trial. So Charlie has a post-conviction petition or a habeas corpus petition available to him. That means he would start at the trial level. I don't know how Florida law handles it. He may have to start at the trial level in a Florida court and see if he can persuade the court that he didn't have effective assistance of counsel. If he loses there and it's appealed and he still loses, then he can go into federal court and claim that he's got this constitutional right that's been violated. That will take a number of additional years. Not to mention if he were actually to win on that claim, and now we're going to have a retrial of him, how many years it would take. So if the state is waiting to see if Charlie, when he has nothing to lose and will be angry at Wendy because she's out having fun and he's sitting getting a Wendy's when he's waiting in Tallahassee to maybe testify at his mother's trial, I think he might, turn on her. I don't think Donna will, but I think Charlie might. But if we have to wait until the appeals and the habeas, it will be a long time. So I'm hoping that's not what's holding the state up. I really am hoping that they will go and prosecute her because whatever evidence they have, It was a major crime, and I think they think she was involved. So I think they should give it a shot. Okay, this one is this case, and it's Maureen Conroy. Would the prosecutors do a reenactment to show it could be done in that time? No. You see that in TV and movies, but you're not going to have the prosecutors actually do a reenactment of how fast it could be done. There are too many areas of speculation. Pretty clear that he would have shot and killed Keith first, because otherwise, why disable the power? But then we don't know what he did inside the house, who was killed first, who was killed second, who was killed third. That sort of reenactment can be pretty expensive, and it's not conclusive because it's easy for the defense to say, well, you don't know that it happened that way. And I don't know that given the short time when all three in the house were killed and the fact that there was a fire, I don't know if the medical examiner could say it happened in this sequence. So I don't think that's going to happen. Okay. The murder of the kids was very personal. The only one benefiting from them not being there is the defendant. The disputed account was rerouted towards the kids' college. Can they make that point? Of course they can make that point. That, in fact, I said early on, I could not, before I, did a deeper dive into the facts of this case, that I could not understand. First of all, I cannot understand anybody committing murder. Secondly, I cannot understand a brother killing a brother. It's just as beyond me. But third, even if Paul was so angry at his brother, so jealous of his brother, so worried that his brother was going to turn him into the law enforcement to be prosecuted, or to out him to family and friends and make him a pariah among the community that they both dealt in, to impoverish him because now he won't have any money coming from the IT company or the computer company, and they've got the waste management company, and he might not get much money out of that. I just can't imagine it. But assuming that would be enough for Paul to decide to kill Keith, I could not understand why then he was killing his sister-in-law, and even more than that, his 8-year-old niece and his 11-year-old nephew. It just was beyond me. And I thought the only possible explanation I have for this is that some of the money, maybe a big chunk of the money, lists Paul as a contingent beneficiary if everyone else has died. And that, in fact, is the case, that he and his brother Corey are both the beneficiaries if the four die. And I think it's more than $1 million that they're looking at, and so that would be the motive for killing the rest of the family. It's just awful. Do we know where all the money went? Did it go to Corey? It depends on what the will said, what the trust instrument said, what the insurance policy said. And I'm going to guess that Keith, in terms of his beneficiaries, had his wife and the kids listed on everything. Now, on some of it, Paul might have had a share. If it's insurance, I don't know. Well, he might have had a share. He would still get that, but he's not going to be able to gain from the killing. So anything that might have come to him because of the murders, he's going to be foreclosed from getting. And then Corey, I don't know, who are Paul's beneficiaries? If the money can't go to him because he committed the murder, then there's nothing for his wife and children to inherit. And then you're either, I don't know that the trust instrument or the insurance policy or anything else would cover all these contingencies. And if not, you're going to be into New Jersey and law when there's no designation by the person who's died as to where the money should go, and what should happen to that money. If they were holding it jointly in the business and Paul embezzled from the business, it will become, they're going to have some way of deciding how much he owed Keith or the business for it, and then he still has a 10% share of the business. It's, I think what I've said demonstrates to you that the part that Keith can't control or couldn't control by having it go to his wife and kids, the part that Paul may have some claim to because of the business, may be complicated to work out. And I don't have enough facts to know what's going on anyway. So I'm speculating, and I'm speculating in an area of law that I really don't know a lot about. I know it on a sort of a, maybe high in the clouds level. And you got my high in the clouds discussion of it. but somebody who knows the state law and insurance fraud law, all those other areas of law is probably certainly in a better position to answer it. Question. So the money is being withheld by now. The money that Paul would have inherited because through Keith is being withheld. There are laws that say that you can't you can't benefit from your own murder of someone. And I think this is true in New Jersey, and in most places, if it's an insurance policy, the insurance adjuster can say, I've got good reason to believe that you committed, murder, and I'm not going to hand over the money to you. The trustee of the trust can do the same thing. They don't have to wait until there's a conviction, and they don't have to decide beyond a reasonable doubt before they can withhold the money. So I'm confident I'm confident the money is being withheld, because if the money were paid over to him, then he wouldn't be entitled to a public defender. He wouldn't be indigent. And he's got public defenders defending him in the murder trial. Okay. Adam Kaleem said Paul has got to be 100% guilty. All the evidence points that way, no matter what kind of doubt the defense tries to bring about. What do you think? I think that's true, but of course we haven't heard the defense case yet. And I would like to hear how the prosecutor goes about handling the time discrepancy. But certainly what I know of so far sounds like it's going to be a guilty verdict by a unanimous jury, which is what obviously you need. Other questions? No? Okay. Tomorrow, I'm going to be doing the trial, and it's going to start at 8:30. If you're going to be watching, I'll be looking for you. Tomorrow night, I will do another wrap-up, and hopefully I'll be in better position to have so I'll at least be able to tell you the witness names. Not that you absolutely have to know the witness names, but I feel better when I tell you the witness names. And then Thursday, I will also do the trial. I'm not going to do a wrap up because I think we're going to be having a guest who was Matt Murphy, who was supposed to be on today, but came up sick. So we will hopefully we can get him on Thursday at 7. So that's what's going on for the next few days as I see it playing out. And for the person, I don't remember who it was, I apologize, who asked about Wendy, I also did a video on the evidence against Wendy. And what I did was I didn't go through all the evidence, because lots of people on the channels have done that, listed all the evidence, and they've had guests on. I tried to do it from the point of view of what evidence is likely admissible against Wendy, and look at only that evidence. And I also discussed there that I don't think she'll get on the stand. So, anything that might be used only to impeach her is not going to be available to use, because she's not on the stand. You can't impeach her. I haven't released that video yet. We haven't done it yet, but I will let you know when we do release it, because if you've got interest in that, I think I might provide some more information that would be helpful to you. So other than that, I think that's it, unless I do 3 panels of Shakespeare again before we leave. And let me see if we can do a play that we all know, because there are a lot of plays that we don't know. Let's do a Midsummer's Night's Dream. Some of us know that anyway. That's Puck and Titania, and it's, all light and airy, and they're fairies and things. So 2 couples run into a fairy-infested woods. The fairy Puck, who's a comedian, puts a love potion into various people's eyes. Everyone falls in love with the wrong person, which happens a lot in real life anyway. I mean, look at all these murder trials we're doing with a spouse murdering a spouse. So, falling in love with the wrong person is not peculiar to Shakespeare. So with that, Please subscribe if you haven't subscribed. Hit like, hit boost or whatever it's called. You can do 3 of those boosts or whatever they're called a week. And if you would use one on me, I would appreciate it. And if you like the content enough and want to be a member, we're doing some special things with members now that you might find fun. And I hope you all have a really great evening and it's not snowing where you are, unless you want it to snow because you want to ski or because you're going to stay inside with a hot toddy or a bourbon and just watch the beautiful snow come down and look at how beautiful it is on the ground and on the trees before it starts to get messy and sloppy. Ciao a tutti.